Good morning. It's Gary Sly and the Legacy of Handmade Objects. It's Monday, December the 2nd, 2024. We're speeding on towards the end of the year here very quickly. It's cold here in Florida. Cold for us means it's been down in the 30s and should be maybe even have a little tiny bit of a freeze here in the next day or two at nighttime. That's about as cold as it generally gets. We don't get snow down this way. It could flurry a couple little spots here and there at night if it's down below freezing, but beyond that you really won't see much of it. But in true Florida fashion, folks are wrapped up like Eskimos or Inuit, if we use their language for themselves there. And so it's different. It won't stay cold but a few days, and then the sun will be bright again and the wind will stop blowing and we'll be back to 70s and paradise here in the winter. I'm not a fan of the cold of any type, so I'm always bundled up, and I love my cardigan sweaters. This is one I bought in Ireland a number of years back. And I try to avoid the cold as much as possible, and I try not to complain during the summer when it gets really, really hot. Wanted to, I guess, a little bit of a history, a little bit of a technique discussion today. You saw at the beginning of today's video some progress photos of a piece that I've been working on, and I actually did some stitching on it a couple weeks ago for part of my video. It's this majestic lace that was designed by Arlene Cohen and works by ABC. And what made me think about wanting to talk today about Assisi and Holbein stitch and some of those kind of things is this broad kind of band here, the second from the middle, that Arlene has designed in this piece. If you see it closely, you can see that what you do there is you've voided out the actual design of the flowers and the leaves in that center part, and you've stitched the background. And that is what you would call a process or a style of stitching, counted thread stitching, called Assisi, named after the little village in Tuscany in Italy called Assisi. It's a place where the church is dedicated to St. Francis of Assisi, who is the patron saint of animals. It's a beautiful spot if you've ever been there. I am told that you can find a good bit of evidence of this kind of stitching there. I did visit there a number of years back, but I was chaperoning a college class when I was there, and we were also with a large group of teenagers from a high school group, and I have to admit I didn't have a lot of time to go exploring on my own. I kind of had to shepherd the group and go about. So I want to go back sometime and see a little bit more about how this modern tradition revived a style of stitching that goes way, way back in Italian stitching history. I love the fact that stitching is an international thing, and that anywhere you go, you're going to find traditions of stitching, embroidery, weaving, the list goes on, of how people use fibers. So I want to just explore a little bit with you this whole idea of the Assisi stitch, and maybe get you to do a little snooping around and see if it's something you might be interested in doing as well. Another reason that I've been paying some attention to this is I've been working my way very slowly and very sporadically through the process of becoming certified in counted thread embroidery through the Embroiderers Guild of America. I did my first project and that passed, and the second one is to design an Assisi stitch piece and to surround it with what is called a Holbein stitch. So I want to talk about both of those a little bit today, kind of look at the history of this tradition. I've got some notes here, so I have to glance down every once in a while and keep myself straight. Assisi stitch is an ancient Italian tradition. I don't get the sense that it would have been called Assisi in the 13th and 14th century when we see the first evidence of it. It really was just called voiding. And voiding means that you, rather than stitch the central design, you leave that central design void and you stitch around it using background. And I know as I've been working on Arlene's piece from Works by ABC, it's a very dramatic effect. If you use a single color thread for your background and you have a piece of fabric that's quite distinctive and kind of pops out, it's really wonderful. Traditional motifs in voiding, which was practiced as early as the 13th, 14th centuries in Italy, would have been fairly simple designs. They would have used a few animals. They might have used some of the symbolism that goes with heraldry, you know, the suits of family trees and things like that. I'm losing the word for that this morning, but family crests and images that referred to family histories. So voiding might have been used in those situations. It was pretty strict in that they didn't use a whole variety of colors. Much Italian embroidery that we might be familiar with today is full of all kinds of vibrant, beautiful colors. But the original voiding would have probably only used red, blue, green, or gold for those background stitches, and probably just a plain kind of linen-looking fabric underneath, so that the images underneath wouldn't have been that terribly dramatic either. I thought it was interesting to see that in some of the earliest examples of what we now call Assisi work, you can see where somebody had drawn an image onto the linen or onto the fabric, and then as they stitched the background, they used those threads to cover what they had drawn. So obviously it wouldn't have been a real complicated design. It would have been kind of a single line of an outline, which would have been easier to cover. We do know that in the monastic tradition, in the secluded parts of Christianity with monks and nuns and the traditions that established there, that this voiding work became quite popular to be used in religious imagery. They would have avoided the brightest colors, but used more muted background colors, and would have used those for religious purposes, like altar cloths and chasubles and the various things that are used in Christianity to express faith in those religious traditions. It is true that in the 16th century, as the Renaissance is blossoming and people are looking for all kinds of new ways to express themselves, that this same kind of tradition, which we are calling voiding at this point until we get to the modern period, was used to do mythical creatures and demons and satyrs and all kinds of cool things that might have shown up in Renaissance stitching. Assisi, as we know it today, was kind of revived after a lull in the 18th and 19th centuries in the little town of Assisi, Italy. So basically you had an older tradition going back as far as the 13th, 14th century that kind of took that really kind of took bloom and became quite popular during the Renaissance, but then sort of died away and was not used very much. And the reason that the modern stitching tradition is called Assisi is because this revival happened in the little town of Assisi in Italy that I was talking about earlier. Now, a lot of time when you see Assisi, you will see a fancy border around the outside, usually black work, something like that. And traditionally that's done using the Holbein stitch. Now, I've talked about Hans Holbein the Younger. He was the court painter for King Henry VIII and the British Crown in England. And his style of painting, called verisimilitude, was notable because it captured every tiny little detail of whatever it was he was painting. And Holbein was astute enough to see that this particular kind of stitching that would have been on clothing and borders of fabric and things like that was an art form of itself. And if you look at some of Hans Holbein's designs, particularly some of the paintings that he did of King Henry VIII himself. Whoops, got a noisy background there. I'll let them pass on through town and then I'll keep talking. You'll see that particularly in things like Henry VIII's clothing and some of his various wives' paintings and things like that that were done by Holbein, you can see this very intricate black work border that goes throughout his paintings. And so in honor of Hans Holbein, they named that stitch the Holbein stitch. Another thing that's distinctive about the Holbein stitch is that typically, as it was used in Henry VIII's court by the seamstresses and stitchers of that day, it would look exactly the same on the front and the back. I guess you can imagine there would have been quite a bit of stress if you were stitching a piece of clothing for King Henry VIII, who liked to chop people's heads off, and you wanted to be sure that it was as perfect as you could make it. And if it was a piece of clothing that he was going to wear in public, it would be important for the stitching to be perfect on the front and the back. Now, you've heard my theories about whether your backs have to be perfect in modern day stitching or not. I would guess unless you feel threatened by a king who's going to get you into trouble, I wouldn't worry as much about the backs, but you know, that's a matter of personal preference as well. So Assisi is a modern tradition of stitching, still largely still practiced a lot in the little town of Assisi, and traditionally you'll see that Holbein stitch usually done in black work around the outside. So it is possible for you to take a design that you might have right now of regular cross stitch, a pattern or something like that, and turn it into a Holbein stitch. I only found kind of one example in my patterns as I was looking, and I suspect there's some more back there. This is a pattern done by Dames of the Needle, and it was in 2010, so it's been around a little while. But you can see this is a floral or plant design where they have outlined the edges of the leaves, and I think this is like a seed pod or maybe a full blossom, I'm not sure. They've outlined that in a blue color, and they voided or allowed the middle of it to remain open so that you can see the design. You could, of course, put some veins on the leaves, which might give even further relief to it. So it might be fun if you're interested in a new idea to take a flower or a simple pattern of an animal or something like that, and rather than stitch the piece itself, use this idea of the Assisi stitching to kind of go around the outside and see how that would look. I have designed a Holbein stitch border for my next project for the EGA. When I was visiting India a few years back, I found a wonderful kind of lattice design of brickwork in one of the buildings we were visiting, and I've already designed the border, but I haven't quite settled yet on what I'm going to do in terms of my Assisi stitch for the middle. I'm glad that the EGA is patient with us and allows us to take our time and figure out how to work our way through that certification process. I've got a busy week coming up. I am in the last couple weeks here in the old shop. If you were to look more closely, which I'm not going to do right now, but if you were here and you were to look more closely, you'd see I've moved a lot of the things that were underneath tables and behind counters and all that sort of stuff, and the new place is filling up. And we're still going to have a big day of boxing and preparation before the movers come in and take some of the big pieces down and we start getting things set up in the new spot. And I thoroughly expect to be open for business at 1012 West Main, which is going to be my new location, on December the 26th, the day after Christmas. It probably will be a little bit of a disaster area, but there should be some walkways and ways for people to come in. And honestly, I love the house so much and the architecture of the new place that I think that's worth coming and taking a look at, even if I don't have all my cross-stitch patterns in a row the way they should be. Do find some time to do things that you love during this crazy season. If you've got some Christmas projects that you're still trying to finish, I hope they won't cause you stress. I always hate stitching to deadlines, but at the same time, it's certainly wonderful to have handmade gifts and ideas that you can pass on to other folks during this wonderful time. If you celebrate Hanukkah or some of the other winter holidays, I wish you joy and happiness as you think about those as well. I'm going to, as soon as I finish here, get busy moving a few more things down to the new place. Got a wonderful group of folks who are helping to develop the Dolly Parton Imagination Library here in Lake County, Florida. And we have a board meeting later today, and I'm looking forward to meeting with those folks as well. So, as always, this is Gary Sly and the Legacy of Handmade Objects. Go check out Assisi Stitching. Take care.